Hi, my name is Carla Sumala, and I serve as co-director of the San Francisco Tech Council. At the October 1st meeting of the Access and Learning Work Group, we welcomed Melinda Kohler, co-founder and CEO of Lessons Up, a San Francisco startup. Recently, Lessons Up has provided 60 free tech training sessions to older adults, clients and employees from Community Living Campaign and Reserve, Self-Help for the Elderly, and Felton Institute. We look forward to talking to Melinda about what her team learned. Kathy Spensley from Felton Institute and also Access and Learning co-chair facilitated the meeting.
I'm Melinda, a co-founder here at Lessons Up, and we have a few instructors who have been giving one-on-one lessons over Zoom to Self-Help for the Elderly, Felton, SF Community Living, as Kathy mentioned. So I'm really excited to kind of let all of you know how it's been going. So we'll jump right into the process. When you make a referral to Lessons Up, we first have a phone call with the person to kind of find out what their needs are and pair them with the best instructor to kind of help them on their tech journey. The most important thing about this conversation, even more so than the questions that we ask, is to keep it conversational, encourage storytelling, and listen and empathize. This is the best way for us to get information about where this person is with technology, their relationship, and the kind of help that they need. We do ask specific questions. We'll ask them, what is the last thing that you did on your iPhone, if it's an iPhone, on your computer? And we'll also just make statements that get them talking. Smartphones are so confusing. You make that statement, you will hear so many interesting things that will help you understand what this person's needs are. Similar to computers are so frustrating. We like to ask how it's going with email because this is a really common challenge area. And then when is the last time you asked for help? Usually launches us into a conversation that leads to what they need the most help with right now. So this is the intake call. It's 15 to 20 minutes. And from there, we schedule their first lesson with one of the instructors. So we'll go ahead now. And during that intake call, we will hear all sorts of things about what they need help with. I took a screenshot of some of the notes that our instructors put down. You'll see Gmail pops up a couple of times. Zoom is one of the most common things that people have been saying in the last couple of months. And then there are the things that people talk about where they don't use language that describes the problem, but will kind of describe it as file management is one of the biggest areas. This is kind of a snapshot of what the instructors are jotting down as they have these conversations. Where does this person need help? But I think more interesting, if we synthesize all of the learnings about what people need help with, the biggest challenge for everyone that we've worked with through this program and people outside of this program just who have come through Lessons Up is related to a concept of abstraction. The client is looking at what's in front of them, and it's very hard for them to understand that the screen or surface that is in front of them has a relationship to other features, functionality, files, and that's a huge obstacle that we try to work on with everyone in kind of a general sense, and you'll see how that happens in some tips that we have coming up. Imagine someone who has never been in a car and you explain to them, a pedal and that it manipulates an engine. It's similar to that with a computer, but it's layers and layers and layers of abstraction. There's an app with a button that triggers something somewhere else that they don't see or understand. And this is where file management usually becomes a big challenge for people. I thought I grabbed something and now I have no idea where it is. So you'll hear this in conversations. And the natural language that people use to describe this big kind of general challenge are things like this. This is going to sound absurd. I put things in documents or downloads. I feel like they go into another abyss. It's hard to find them. I started using my personal computer with Office Outlook. Everything seems to go to Outlook now. It's kind of confusing. How do I add a virtual background on my laptop from my phone? This idea that if something is on their phone, it can't exist somewhere else. I use TextEdit. I'm flip-flopping. I feel like everything I need to put everything into Word. Just a lot of confusion about how things are related to each other, different programs and apps. So these are some of the natural language. This is some of the natural language that people will use when they describe problems that help us understand where they need the most help. So to give you an example of this, this is Michael Edelstein, and he has been taught how to do a blog post in Psychology Today. He's a psychologist. When he comes to his Psychology Today, he has very specific steps that he follows. And even though if you go to his blog site and look, it seems very, very obvious that you can add an image to the blog by clicking choose file, he has no idea how to do that. In fact, he's had 2 lessons on how to do this. And in his second lesson with us, he finally started to get it. And to help him get there, I'll show you just a very brief. The surface that you're looking at is not where you need to conduct all of the work. And you kind of have to be aware of other surfaces. So because you're working in the Surface post body, and that's where you're kind of typing everything.
Right.
There's going to be a lot of confusion that that's not how you manage images. And you have to look elsewhere on your screen. And for you, that's this right side menu called images.
I see, yeah.
But this can happen on any website, that there's a main surface where you will conduct the majority of the work.
Yeah.
But there are side menus where you will do additive things like adding an image.
Right. Sounds right. Yeah, because I'm usually not looking in the right place. And I think what you said makes a lot of sense, that because I'm looking at the center, where the main action is, and really the main action is somewhere else.
Right, and it's really confusing because it's a slightly different process. So you kind of just witnessed firsthand, after Michael had been through the steps once, and then again and again explaining the layers, and in this case, not even layers, just you're looking at a surface and there's a menu right next to it. That causes a lot of confusion. He's now started to get it, and he can now upload images on his own on his blog, but seeing what he's going through can help us understand why there might be so much confusion for people who did not grow up with these devices to do what look like very simple operations. And this is what Michael experienced is very similar to what everyone experiences that we work with. That happens a lot. And so we'll do a lot of just general teaching on how to work on a website, or we'll try to find similarities between different types of surfaces and menus. You know, there's a top bar, there's a bottom bar, and explain the difference to people, because yeah, that causes a lot of confusion. And it is the size of the text. And it's also, if something changes, they see everything as sort of a static, like you went into a room and the drawer was here, and next week it's not there, then something broke and there's no way to move forward. So it's explaining those concepts. So a typical lesson, we'll start with a few minutes kind of reviewing what happened in the last lesson. Make sure they're still able to follow the steps, and then discussing any new challenges that might have come up. And then you'll agree on what we're going to focus on for today's lesson. Most of the people in the programs from your organizations have something very specific in mind, and they tend to have pretty solid goals about, are they trying to learn Okta, something for work? Are they trying to learn Excel? But we'll always do that check-in in case something more urgent came up. To kick off a lesson, we will ask them to share their screen with us and show us how they would normally try to do whatever operation they are working on. That's really critical, because one of the reasons why people will get something wrong after going through a process is that they can't remember the first step. So for us to see how they naturally start that first step gives us the opportunity to correct it. And then they have a much higher percentage of remembering how to do the full process 2 weeks later. if you imagine a setting on your iPhone that you have to change and you can't remember that you have to go to settings, maybe you're wasting your time in the Facebook app when it's in settings, and something like that will happen. And then if you just tell them the first step and they can remember that first step, they can usually get through the rest of the process on their own. So we always ask them to show us how they normally try to do something, and then we'll correct that first sort of bad habit that makes it very difficult for them to ever get back on track. Then as we start the process, we'll kind of identify misunderstandings, guide them through steps, and ideally toward the end, they're practicing steps unguided. And at the end, we will wrap up by very clearly stating, you now know how to take a picture, send it to your sister on text message, and post it on Facebook. Just very, very specific operations so that they get the benefit of understanding what they just did.
We have a question here from Fiona. Curious, what platform do you do your lessons?
Zoom. And I will share some of the challenges with that in a few minutes. So we'll set goals for the lesson. Goals should be very, very specific. A client will be able to join a Zoom class, will be able to understand how to download and create an account, set up, host, and run their own Zoom meeting. And then at the end of the lesson, our instructors will take the notes. Okay, they were able to do X, Y, and Z, or sometimes they weren't able to do that. I did want to talk to you about a little bit more about this idea of abstraction, because it's the biggest one that we've seen. And one of the most common points of confusion is copy and paste. And we see this, a lot of people that we work with, they have a lot of confusion over copy and paste. They copy something and they don't know where it went. So in this clip that I'm going to show you, you'll see that the instructor struggles to make this clear, but tries to explain some of the behind the scenes to help Opal understand what's going on.
I could not highlight it. That was part of the problem. It was a much longer number. This is the tail end of it, but I couldn't highlight it. And then if I go up here, I couldn't copy it. But I could try Command X. Would that be?
Yeah, that would. Yeah, Command X would be to cut.
Okay.
But if it's showing up in your clipboard, then it's already kind of like saved in that little snippet of memory. So you should just be able to like paste it wherever you want to put it. Okay. So if you went, say we open.
So in this example, you'll see that Becky is kind of showing her that what happens is Opal is copying something and she has no idea how to access it, no idea where it went. So she introduced, hey, here's this clipboard to show her that there is a physical place where it's going. And now she's moving towards explaining to her that it's being stored in this place in memory. And then you can use a command to paste it. And you don't actually have to go anywhere physical to find it. It's a bit of a long lesson. I just wanted you to kind of see a little example of that. But this again gets back to solving problems that create confusion in a lot of areas. And if we can clear them up, people will have a much better idea of how to operate within all of their apps, platforms, or whatever it is that they might be using. And a big piece of this is repeating these concepts over and over again. You copied something here, you can access it there. You're looking at a surface here, it exists somewhere else too. So we'll do this throughout the lessons. And then you will, over time, start to see people have these aha moments. And Opal can now use copy paste, which is wonderful. I know that everyone was curious about challenges with remote learning. Absolutely, we have them. One of the biggest challenges is if we're working on a mobile device and we're on Zoom. Oftentimes, the instructor can follow along on their own device and give very specific instructions, or they can ask very specific instructions about what are you seeing. And then in this clip, you will see that Becky and Cynthia are at the point now where she's holding up the phone.
Can you bring it up a little bit? Okay, go up. Okay, go up a little more. Okay, go up again, up higher.
So you get the idea. These challenges do happen. They were able to manage that challenge using that technique. It's certainly not the most effective, so it's something that is lost. when you're working over Zoom, but usually by the second or third lesson, there's enough of a relationship between the instructor and the learner that they're able to get through and manage these obstacles. Another big obstacle that we see with remote learning, and you have to use a platform, and so we've chosen Zoom, again comes back to this idea of understanding different surfaces. So we will see that right now I'm looking at you over Zoom and you have a Zoom interface in front of you, but you understand that I am sharing my screen and it is not your screen. That's a big hurdle for a lot of people. And so one thing that we'll do is we'll first do a lot of practice when this is a new concept for people on the Zoom interface and how to interact with that. And then we can differentiate that with other windows and the other part of the screen. So you can see that here where Catherine will kind of walk her through some basic features on the Zoom surface.
So if you just hover down to the bottom, there's different icons and one that says chat.
Okay.
Okay. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I'm going.
So do you ever run across, I run across all the time that, yes, it's another part of the screen, and then it's also the size is so small that people don't see it.
Yes.
Send you a message. I just said,
Okay.
Okay, great. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I'm trying to send it back. Okay.
Awesome.
Now, but can I move this or, oops. I don't know what did I do?
It looks like you stopped your video.
So you get the idea that the first step is getting them familiar that they're looking at a surface. It has features, it has functionality. If you kind of get them familiar with that, just Zoom surface first, then you can go from there to, okay, now you're sharing a screen and what I see is your screen and you can continue operating on that screen. That is a very big hurdle for people. So that's how we handle that hurdle with sort of distance learning over Zoom. And so this, you kind of have seen now what it's like to go through a lesson, what the universal challenges are, how we handle them. And the end, we have been following up with people, getting their feedback, and everyone is really happy with the experience. For them, it's very magical to be able to show someone exactly what they're stuck on and have them right there with them in the experience. So that's kind of the biggest takeaway for us. The other thing, and this was especially true with the self-help for the elderly, would be the ability to jump around topics. Selena led those lessons. She's our Chinese instructor. And what she found was that in addition to having something very specific, it wasn't until you got into the lesson that a person would discover their biggest challenge. And they might wind up kind of shifting gears mid-lesson to focus on something that was more high priority. And that's important because it's very hard for people to verbalize what the true challenge is. And sometimes it takes that full lesson or 2 or 3 to kind of get there. That's what I wanted to share with you today, and am happy to take any questions.
So we have one question here from Fran from the Public Library. Do you ever use something like TeamViewer or other remote control?
We have not. We could use remote control, but our goal is to keep the learner in the driver's seat. Ideally, they will learn how to do these operations independently. So we would rather go through the struggle of walking them through it and helping them get there. Sometimes what we will do is share our screen and demonstrate, and then have them share their screen and go through it.
Hi, Melinda. Hi, this is Steve. Right. I wanted to, they're not even sure whether they have connection in their building or if they are living in it, and they would not be able to describe to us what their situation is. Phone lines. Right. How would you approach with getting them access?
I would first ask them who helped them in the past get access, who might have worked with them when they first moved in, or who has been at their house lately that used a device. And there's usually some family member or family that knows a little bit more about the situation. And if not, then it might be the actual building or property manager that would need to get involved and explain how things work. But you can also ask them about their bills and say, do you pay an AT&T bill? Do you pay a Verizon bill? Have you ever received a bill from providers like this? And they don't necessarily know that it's a provider, but they might say, oh yeah, well, of course I have AT&T. And then that gets us a step closer to what was the last bill you received. Let's take a look at some information there. Let's see if you have an account that you can log into. It is a lot of detective work to get to the point where we have a full understanding of what their situation is.
What did you learn about the types of devices that people were using? Phone, tablet, PC, Androids, etc.
Yeah, we do all of our lessons for the most part on, we'll make sure that there is a computer screen available. That's one of the requirements that we set forth for this specific partnership. But a lot of the challenges do occur on mobile. And then it's that challenge that you saw between Becky and Cynthia of holding up the device or talking through specifically what you see on the screen. But that in the general population, device distribution, again, it gets into, I don't want to say privilege, but you all know the situation that not everyone can afford these devices. And so it's a big challenge for them to get tech learning. And it's one of the biggest challenges we're facing right now with schools and students, but yeah.
So we'll have about 5 minutes. No, we've actually got, about 5 minutes left. I'm going to open it up to anybody because we don't have any other questions. I wonder, Edith, perhaps you want to, I know that Cynthia Fine took the course and was really excited about it. Maybe you could just give a little feedback on why did she like it so much?
Well, once she mastered, or I should say, learned how to use Zoom, her whole world opened up. I mean, she told me that she was able to connect with her extended family. They actually, participated in a performance. They watched a performance together as a family. So she was, she doesn't know how she lived without it, really.
You do make an interesting point, though, that there is something about learning Zoom that opens up the world because it's access to Zoom, but it's also the process of learning how to use a new platform that can be applied to a lot of other platforms.
So you've been doing this for a while now, and you've been working in the space of older adults and people with disabilities. I'm assuming you've been learning a lot in the process. What are some things that your biggest learnings as an organization, as a company, in terms of how to do this better, more efficiently, more effectively? What are your takeaways in doing these kinds of lessons?
Yeah, we're at the point where we've identified these universal trends in disconnects, which is why we talked a little bit today about abstraction and understanding that you're looking at a surface and there's more beyond that surface. So we're starting to develop new curriculum that starts at that level that will help people apply these learnings more broadly and just more quickly improve the experience. So you saw the clip with Dr. Michael Edelstein at the beginning, and he's been a big driver of that, kind of helping us work with, we're working with user experience designers to break down the sort of universal language behind how tech products are built, and especially these user interfaces, so that we can translate that into lessons that we can give people. I mean, I, as a user who uses technology every day, understand, for example, that if I see 3 dots in the right-hand menu, or in the right-hand corner of a screen, that signifies a menu. And so it's breaking that down and synthesizing it and creating curriculum that we can then deliver more widely, and ideally at more affordable rates, because group one-on-one lessons are very expensive. But if we can take these universal lessons and understand where everyone is getting hung up, we can start to do those in, we can create guides that people can go through on their own, or even do live group lessons and still have just as much impact. So we're now at the point where we've taken these learnings and we can optimize them to create resources that clear up these big misunderstandings faster.
One last thing, in terms of those universal trends and disconnects, you've talked about abstraction. Can you mention a couple of the others? Just names that you're running into?
Yeah, this is still, I am not as much of a technologist. And in fact, Sanyukta, if you have any insight on this, because you work in this as well, I would love for you to jump in. The idea of abstraction and then the idea of the surface and what's beyond the surface, and they're slightly different. But
no, I think you already touched upon it, and that's the user experience. We do notice that most of the tech products that are built today are built with younger people in mind who don't necessarily have the same visual problems or dexterity problems. So you will see websites which have like lots of flashing stuff on it, or they have like things which are moving around, and that becomes very hard for older adults. So Melinda, I think, kind of pointed out, like, yes, the surface, the idea of that surface and the abstraction, and then the UX is, I think, are the two big things that negatively impact technology for older adults.
Yeah, that's a good way to synthesize it down. The immediate surface, the user experience, and then abstraction.
Thank you very much. That was really great. Appreciate you coming. Come back anytime.